Hello writers, in this video I'm going to share something with you that's going to help you improve the quality of your young author's stories. See, a good story is really made up of two kinds of stories. You're probably most familiar with the external story. This is all the action in the story. And the external story tells what happens in the story. But there's also what we call the internal story. These are the thoughts of the characters. And in the internal story, a writer tries to show the main character's response to what happens in the external story. So when you write your stories, you're going to have a combination of the two. And I like to think of a seesaw here. And what you want to do is kind of seesaw back and forth between telling the external story and the internal story. And I'm going to use the Rupert story I'm writing to help you understand what I mean by the internal story. Let's take a look at this first sentence here and see if we can identify what we mean by the internal story. So recoiling from the shock and grossness of the prank, Rupert winced as he flicked the peel with the tip of his pencil, landing it on the ground. Now here we actually have an example of this seesawing back and forth between internal and external story. Notice the beginning of the sentence and the language. Recoiling from the shock and grossness of the prank. The word grossness is carefully chosen here, and it shows Rupert's reaction to the prank. Rupert thinks that the fact that this banana peel landed on his sketchbook, to him, that banana peel is gross. So I don't use the word thought here, but just a careful selection of that word lets you know what Rupert's response to it is. Let's move down here and take a look at this sentence. A smudge of banana pulp remained on the page. Now that's a description of what was left over from that banana peel landing on his page. But notice the word smudge. Again, by carefully choosing this word, I'm letting you know, I'm letting the reader know what that mark on his sketchbook means to him. A neutral word would be mark, but that doesn't carry enough meaning. When Rupert looks at that banana pulp on his page, to him it's a smudge. And we know from the meaning of the word smudge that a smudge is something that dirties something. We don't like smudges. And that's what Rupert thinks of that banana pulp that's on his notebook. Okay? Let's continue a little bit further here. It says that Rupert wiped it with the sleeve of his shirt. That's that external story. I'm describing the action here. And then I continue with, but the stain was still there. Here's one of these carefully chosen words again. So at this point, after wiping the smudge, the mark is still there, if you will. And now it's a stain. And again, I want you to think about the meaning of the word stain. A stain is something that's usually permanent. It's that mark that stays there, even if you try to get it out. And that's what Rupert now thinks of the smudge. That's his thought. And what does he think about the stain? Look at this one-word sentence, ruined. I don't write, Rupert thought that his sketchbook was ruined. I could have written that. But I can also just write one word here, and you know that this is what Rupert is thinking about, that stain that is now on his sketchbook. Then he continues to think about what's just happened. The page was ruined, the way Chuck was ruining Rupert's life. So he started thinking a little bit more, and now he's starting to think that not only has Rupert ruined his sketchbook, but he's also ruining his life. Then in this sentence here, butterflies swirled in his stomach. Now, here I'm still kind of telling the internal story. I'm showing you Rupert's response to this banana peel landing on his sketchbook. Okay? That's, again, the banana peel landing on the sketchbook is that external story. Here we kind of show his feeling. It's a response in the form of a feeling. Butterflies swirled in his stomach. And then he wanted to do something. This is kind of getting back into his thoughts, but he remained glued to the bench. And now I get back to the internal story here. He's frustrated and angry with himself for not having the courage, Not only was he angry at Chuck, but now he's getting angry at himself. And as he thinks about it, he tries to figure out why is he so angry. And he realizes that he doesn't have that courage he needs to get up from that bench and say something to Chuck. And right here I seesaw back to the external story. Now I want to show Rupert's actions. He ripped the page from the spiral binding and crumpled it into a type ball, and he flung it in the garbage. So again, I seesawed from the internal story up here to the external story here where I show his action. And now I want to go ahead and seesaw back. Right here I seesaw back to that internal story. I want to get inside Rupert's head again. And I wrote, Rupert wished he could rip Chuck out of his life as easily as he ripped out that page. And that last thought is what ends that scene. Now for your homework assignment, what I'm going to ask you to do is start underlining the language that you see that helps tell that internal story. And for this small passage here, I've gone ahead and I've underlined some of the words that we just talked about. Grossness, smudge, stain, okay, ruined. And I could keep going here. This whole section here, frustrated and angry for not having the courage. Sorry about that, I just had some technical problems. So then I went ahead and I underlined the rest of the language in this passage. Your job is to take all three scenes, scenes 1, 2, and 3, and go through it with a pencil and underline all the language, all the examples of that internal story where you're showing the character's response to what's happening in the story. And I think as you get more and more comfortable identifying that internal story that you see in someone else's story, the easier it is going to be for you to write those kind of details in the story that you're writing for your young author piece. So good luck with that, writers.